Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad, bringing you the podcast, Capitalism Hits Home, a podcast produced by Democracy at Work. The podcast is about the mutual shaping of politics, economics, and personal life in the United States. Today, I want to talk about the sex abusers in chief. The sex abusers whose abuse, or alleged abuse, is a known secret. The most recent of these is Sean Diddy Combs, who is the alleged rapist of both men and women. His alleged abuse is so extensive that in the hotline set up for accusers, it had 2,000 calls for people to report sex abuse, 2,000 in 24 hours. Another one we'll talk about today is Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein was the most powerful and successful producer of films by around 2017. But in 2017, dozens of women came out with the accusations that American film producer Harvey Weinstein had raped or sexually assaulted them over a period of at least 30 years. Over 80 women in the filming industry came out to accuse Harvey Weinstein. Jeffrey Epstein is another one. He's accused of raping hundreds of young girls, some as young as 13 or 14. We wouldn't have really known about this, except that Julie Brown, a very courageous reporter with the Miami Herald, decided to look at what had happened in that case where 35 young women accused Jeffrey Epstein of sexual assault. Well, once Julie Epstein revealed this, enormous ramifications went all the way up to the president and his district attorney. The person who was the district attorney, the federal district attorney for Florida, was Alexander Acosta. He gave a sweetheart tap on the wrist to Jeffrey Epstein for his 35 allegations. First of all, they reduced it to one allegation of soliciting prostitution from an underage girl. They didn't even mention that the teenagers who claimed they were sexually abused were also paid to recruit their friends for this. And after the grand jury investigation, which was highly suspect, Epstein cut a deal with Acosta, this was in 2008, that allowed him to have only one charge, as I said before, of trying to procure an underage prostitute, and be sentenced to 1.5 years. And that 1.5 years, he was in prison only at night. He was excused to do whatever he wanted, probably raping young girls, which was a predilection of his. During the day, he just had to report to sleep at the Palm Beach County Jail at night and to wear an ankle bracelet so they could trace him. He was also required to register as a sex offender. Acosta approved Epstein's plea deal, even though 35 women alleged rape by Epstein. And as I said before, Acosta's sentence was 1 year of part-time stay in a prison. Well, Julie Brown's expose put that outrage out front, and people saw it. And it spurred an investigation, which put Epstein behind bars on new federal charges. And as part of those federal charges, he was put in the Metropolitan Correction Center, which is a jail that is operated by the federal government. Now, Epstein was probably given quite an easy ride because he videotaped the rapes of the girls, not only by him, but by the famous men who came to see him on what he called Slave Island, the Virgin Islands. He would fly them there, and then the men could rape the girls. Jeffrey Epstein was then found dead of asphyxiation, which was attributed to suicide. The fact that he had evidence from very famous men's sexual assaults meant that it was probable that Jeffrey Epstein was killed. Jeffrey Epstein's brother had a separate autopsy taken that said he was strangled, and there were other suspicious things happening. For example, Epstein had genuinely tried to commit suicide earlier, and the rule at the Metropolitan Correction Association is if you tried to commit suicide, you have to have a roommate at all times. But somehow his roommate was removed. The light outside Jeffrey Epstein's cell was broken, and it stayed broken. It wasn't fixed. They had two women who were employed by the jail who were supposed to check on him every 15 or 20 minutes, but they assigned women who had already worked 12-hour shifts and were exhausted, and the likelihood was they'd fall asleep and wouldn't check. It's no wonder that Epstein could have been murdered. He had evidence in his mansion, in the safe, of videotapes of very famous men like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump and Ehud Barak of Israel raping young girls, and of course Prince Andrew too, forgot him. Now to name another known and not pursued sex abuser, at least not pursued for a very long time, allowed to continue with sex abuse. Bill Cosby was accused by about 80 women of sex abuse. He is accused of drugging and then sexually abusing these women. That's really quite dramatic. He got away with it because he posed as this avuncular, uncle-like sweet man who invited women to his office to help them with their careers and then drugged them and sexually abused them. He wasn't exposed for many, many years. And he only was exposed because the comedian Hannibal Buress made a joke in his stand-up on television. And the joke was, Bill Cosby has some nerve telling black men, pull your pants up, when he's a known rapist. Get your act together, Bill Cosby. Don't look down on us. Well, that comment went viral. The content that how dare you, just because you have a successful sitcom, put down other black men when you have such a record. And at the end of his comic bit, Hannibal Buress said, you doubt my word? Just look up Bill Cosby rape on Google. See what you get. Well, after that, women started coming forward after that went viral. And Bill Cosby was finally accused, thanks in part to the statement of duress, and thanks in great part to Me Too, that allowed women to feel they could come forward. The last person I'll mention is Donald Trump, our sex abuser in chief. He has used sexually insulting epithets about women. He's known to have gone into the young women's dressing room, the women who were looking to be Miss America, and ogling them, knowing full well that they were vulnerable, that they wanted to be Miss America to have a career. He also bragged about grabbing pussy. He said, they let you get away with it if you're famous. He wasn't found guilty until first Stormy Daniels brought it up very courageously, and then E. Jean Carroll sued Trump for sexual abuse and won. In every case, their abuse was a known secret. In every case, that secret was silenced for a long time. And now we have a sex abuser as our commander-in-chief, quite remarkably. Why? Well, I think there are two systems that contributed to this, many probably more, but at least two. One is patriarchy. Patriarchy is a system that privileges men and maleness over women and non-binary people and femaleness. Patriarchy assumes that men are either more capable or more deserving of power, control, and position in society. At the same time, patriarchy really hurts men. Patriarchy puts men in what's called a man box, which is enforced by boys and other men, a box that designates vulnerability, neediness, of care, of attention, of friendship, of comfort, as non-manly and things to be ashamed of. The only need extolled within patriarchy is the need for sex. Because power, control, and privilege are given, and when empathy and kindness and neediness are denied. This kind of man box limitation of men's emotions, which is terribly hurtful for men and boys, is enforced not only by coaches who say when someone is lagging, "What's the matter, you on your period?" and refers to them as girls, which is a huge insult on the coach's part, or boys call each other names like faggot or sissy because they don't want to put on a macho show. Man codes require showing dominance and no fear and no need except the need for sex. Capitalism also plays its part in known sex abuse. In capitalism, we accept that the rich and powerful are fine no matter what they do. Donald Trump is a known, or at least highly accused, and in one case, not only accused but fined, sex abuser. He's the President of the United States. I will talk about this later, but Hegseth, his nominee for Defense Secretary, has a police report of sex abuse. Elon Musk's workplace has been accused multiple times of grotesque misogyny, which is hatred of women, humiliation of women, and use of sexually crude materials and jokes in the workplace. Linda McMahon, the education secretary and co-head of the World Wrestling Entertainment, is accused of being an enabler because she ignored the reports of rape of young men who were recruited to be volunteers in the work crew for the World Wrestling Entertainment. She allowed the manager, Mr. Phillips, to go unreprimanded with multiple abuses of rape of boys. Why? Well, we have to understand that capitalism and patriarchy work together to excuse the rich and powerful, no matter what they do, and to ignore women's pain, whether it's Sean Diddy Combs, who was so famous and is now accused, or Weinstein and Epstein and Cosby, who also stand to be accused. Also, it means light sentences for the rich and famous. Lester Moonves, who was very high in the echelons of CBS, was given dismissal, that's all. His modus operandi was to invite young women in who had offered him, in his position, scripts and ideas for shows and tell him he would go over it with them, and then returning naked when he asked to excuse himself. So his message was clear. It was the same message that Stormy Daniels got when she was vulnerable because she wanted to switch from being a porn actress to a legit actress. And Trump told her he could get her a job on The Apprentice so she could transition to being a legitimate actress. And then after he made that offer, he went into the bathroom and emerged naked, giving a hint of what he wanted. Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein hired girls from welfare families, girls who were poor or homeless, offering them several $100s just to give Jeffrey Epstein a massage. And then after Jeffrey Epstein raped them, they were so humiliated and shamed and unhappy. And they were raped in this beautiful mansion, screaming wealth, that they were too intimidated to say anything. Sometimes they were artists who were promised by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein to be promoted as artists who didn't have the money to promote themselves or the connections with rich, powerful, connected people who would help them. What happened with Jeffrey Epstein is very important because he invited the rich and famous to rape girls on Slave Island. He had flight logs of who flew to Slave Island and got a chance to abuse young women on the plane, and who was a guest at his Palm Beach mansion. But once it was revealed that these men raped women and he videotaped them, somehow the flight logs have all disappeared. When they broke into Epstein's mansion when she was in jail, they blew up the safe that had his videotapes, and all the videotapes just disappeared because the rich and famous men got away with it. Some of them lost jobs. Alex Acosta, who excused Jeffrey Epstein with only a slap on the wrist, resigned as labor secretary. He was given that post as his reward, it seems. And he did say, I made that decision. It wasn't my decision. I just transmitted that decision for Jeffrey Epstein. It was above my pay grade. Well, who was it then? These are illustrations of why these people get away with it. Why Weinstein, famous producer, had employees bring his injection in to his interviews with young women in a discreet way so he could go into the bathroom and inject himself to have an erection. Then they would disappear and he would rape the girls and nobody, and the women, and no one would come to their aid even if they screamed. The hotel staff colluded with him because he rented so many rooms in that hotel and because he was so rich and famous. Bill Cosby, as I said before, was jokingly accused on television because it was also a known secret that he sexually molested and drugged about between 50 and 80 women, and he got away with it. Sean Diddy Combs, who is another one, has gotten away with it for so many years. Because at his freak parties, where people were raped in front of their guests, Donald Trump, Melania, Al Sharpton, and Paris Hilton were all invited to his parties, where the crimes of the rich and famous were ignored. I think that it's undeniable that the rich and famous can get away with crime because of the combination of capitalism and patriarchy. Rich and famous men can get away with crimes because the capitalism combined with the patriarchy allows them to do that. Capitalists are not allowed to feel empathy and connection to the workers they employ from whom they make a profit. You think Jeffrey Bezos loses any sleep for the Amazon workers who get injured through the repetitive movements at his warehouses? So repetitive that they have vending machines that give out free painkillers for people who are hurt so they can keep walking and keep working and keep the repetitive movements going. They are rich and famous. And that's why their abuses are known secrets. Of course, we can stop that. I think a strong, progressive front, a populist front in the United States, could put an end to that, because it could put an end to the excuse and the known secrets of rich, powerful men's sex abuse. Thank you. Goodbye for today.